And they've got a huge epidemic of opiate type.
Fentanyl.
Fentanyl's one of them. But also those type of drugs which contain opiates in them, and there's people addicted to things like painkillers and things like this because it's very freely given to.
Well, that's fentanyl, you see, and suicides at the moment in the States are pretty much the main cause of the drop in life expectancy.
Yeah, but it's not an issue over here, is it?
Not yet.
I haven't heard of fentanyl over here, really. I mean,
no. But you see,
is it because it's
what's worrying is
it just quickly? Is it a prescription drug?
Yes,
it's a prescription drug, but it's also being taken by. It's also taken on the black market over there. Just so it's clear to the people who are listening. So, it hasn't been approved over here.
No,
and the chances are it's unlikely to be approved over here.
Yes, it's extremely toxic. Even if someone hasn't taken it. Merely taking a few grains of it can be lethal an overdose.
Well, they say that about crystal meth as well, don't they? It's instantly addictive. Because I always used to believe that you have to take things, long time ago, that you have to take things over a long period of time until it actually became a habitual thing that you actually did, because it's like nicotine. They say nicotine, for example, when you smoke cigarettes, is highly addictive.
Crystal meth may be what we call a methylator. So we know that some drugs can treat addictions by demethylating in a single dose, because methylation is potentially the physical substrate of addiction, of the cycle of the subjective sense of addiction, and therefore, it's perfectly possible that an addictive substance in one dose may methylate and make you addicted.
Because I'm not because I have to challenge that a little bit. You see, because here's the thing, and this is the analogy I was looking with a cigarette, is if you're actually a smoker, nicotine is actually only in your system about 2 days. So in effect, after 2 days, you're actually already going off that. You're not addicted to that nicotine anymore. You may get some withdrawal, but that is not going to actually last a long period of time. And the reason why people smoke is because it's actually a habitual thing, is it not? So people go back to smoking, for example, because they actually enjoy smoking when they have a drink.
No, but if you're used to having your nicotine and the levels drop, you'll start craving it. For instance, I mean, if you, I don't think it's so relevant for yourself because you do have a little smoke, but
very rarely.
Smokers have been shown to smoke directly to maintain their nicotine levels in their blood.
Yeah, but you can get a vaporizer with nicotine. You can buy nicotine gum.
Yes.
But the thing is, that doesn't have, and
that'll feed it. Components.
So it is a habitual thing. It's something that has been conditioned into you.
There's two components. There's the ritualistic part of it, and there is the chemical part of it. You're absolutely right.
So in some cases, if you actually want to get someone off an addiction, one of the quickest ways would actually be to actually change their environment at the same time as well.
Essential. I mean, it's why the Muslim religion is so effective, because it's extremely ritualistic. People have to pray 5 times a day.
Well, I wonder when we're going to come back to religion on this podcast.
We're just talking about the power of structure and ritual. And yes, absolutely. Therefore, the same with smoking. People miss the ritual. They don't know what to do with their fingers.
The thing is, if the rhythm, and I call it the rhythm, if the rhythm is not working for you, you've actually got to implement a new rhythm, and you've got to start tweaking it. And it does take time, The thing is, and it's the same when I see all these new resolutions. I'm going to do this to change. You can't do that, because when I started dieting and losing weight and things like this, and someone said to me, "Oh, why don't you do this as well? Why don't you do this?" I'm thinking, actually, one thing at a time, because you can only reach these little small milestones at a time, because if you make too many habitual changes at one time, cognitively, you can't cope with that. So you'll actually go back to everything.
Well,
you've got to take. So, for example, if you're going to start, let's say you're going to start exercising, hypothetically, all right? Start exercising for a month to 6 weeks. Then think about the diet and start introducing the diet for 5 to 6 weeks. And then, if you want to give up smoking, you can give up smoking after a period of time. But you can't do it all at once.
When you're addicted, though, you will say you're addicted to cocaine. In a certain situation which you associate with cocaine, that will be a social cue, and you'll start cocaine seeking. So you can't gradually change stuff with things like cocaine and alcohol. You have to cut social cues or situational cues out of your life. So don't go to a pub. Don't go out with people who are going to drink alcohol. Because if you do, and you will start seeking your cocaine or seeking your alcohol in those situations.
Which is why you should change your environment. Sometimes it's best to go. And I've said this before in a podcast.
It's not a gradual thing.
If you want to change your life, change your friends in some cases.
Sometimes, yes.
And I forgot what I was going to say because there was something... Actually, yeah, because one of the things also is... Because, there's 3 times of accountability. There's the accountability where you actually hold yourself accountable. You take personal accountability. And that is actually having enough strong will to be able to go and make those changes if you want to. And this is what we were talking about a few weeks ago, actually probably about 2 weeks ago when we started talking about purpose. If your purpose is big enough, if your why is big enough to change something, actually that becomes an internal motivator for you to actually want to change it. Whereas most people actually go for the external motivation to actually make those changes.
And of course, cocaine gives people purpose. That's a big problem.
It also gives you a dopamine hit as well, particularly if you're in that level of depression. So in some ways, as I said, you sometimes actually need to change your environment to be able to do that, because then you actually start. But still, you've got to get clarity on what your purpose is, why you're doing it. So if you're an alcoholic, and this is, when you see a lot of fathers or even mothers, I suppose, an alcoholic actually. Is your why big enough to actually look after, to be there for your kids? And if it's big enough, you'll actually find that you'll find a reason to change it. Now, you may not be able to do it all on your own because we actually need to be able to get that level of support, but you've got to make that decision and hold yourself personally accountable to be able to do that. The second type of accountability is coaching or counselling accountability, where you go to someone who's prepared to guide you or kick you up the arse, basically. And sometimes we actually need that level of support, particularly if you've been on it for a long period of time. And the third one is peer accountability. So it's the people around you. So it's about not letting the people around you down. So when you actually can identify what those 3 forms of accountability are and how you can actually apply them, and what your purpose is, which is again what we were covering last week, you're more likely to actually make that change. Are you not?
Well, yes. But did you know one of the main, the strongest factor outside of therapy and willpower that's been shown to regulate cigarettes and alcohol and presumably by inference illicit drugs? The strongest factor by a multiple over everything else outside of therapy and willpower is cost. That's the strongest factor.
What do you mean cost?
Cost. The more expensive alcohol is, the more tax you put on it, the less people drink, the less alcoholism there is, and the same with cigarettes. And presumably, I guess the same with knife crime. You know, if knife crime isn't treated very severely, then the cost is low.
Did you know something? You can do that, and that will actually have an impact on... That will have a level of impact. But the thing is, you know what, I've walked past many tube stations where I've seen the guys selling bootleg tobacco to people, and there's a queue of people actually looking to buy it. People will find people will find a way around it. People will revert to making their own alcohol to a degree. I mean, even when people talk about magic mushrooms, you can go online.
But the availability isn't quite there. I mean, you're right, some people will have their sources, but the vast majority will not be making their own alcohol or even know someone who makes their own alcohol. They will just drink less. Or smoke less.
I'm not pro-drugs, to be honest, and I'm quite fortunate. As far as I know, my daughter doesn't take them, and she's actually quite anti them. However, there's always, and I'll openly admit this online, I mean, when you hear things like Steve Jobs said, one of the most overriding factors of him actually having that aha moment, or that, that moment, that moment that was instrumental in his choices, was when he actually took LSD. That was one of the cases. So when we talk about hallucinative drugs, and we've talked about this in the past, and I'm not condoning you should go and take LSD or things like this, because there's just as many dangers. But because we are so unwilling to look at other factors, medicine is not willing to actually go there either. So, for example, are magic mushrooms addictive, or because I don't understand. I've never heard that LSD or hallucinative drugs are, but they also help depressed people. Am I right? You were talking about that.
Absolutely right, they do. Yeah.
So whether it's
very effectively.
So
microdosing is not the right way of doing it, by the way.
Microdosing is not what, sorry?
Is not the correct way of doing it. You have to have a big proper dose of it.
Well, to be able to do that. But the thing is, that's also self-medication.
Well, indeed. And once we talk about this, we need to caution, as usual, that we're not licensed to give medical advice. And also that's illegal in this country. Having said that, ketamine via prescription, but for off-license usage, is currently being used in the UK as an antidepressant.
Okay.
There's a clinic in Oxford that's
using
it.
And this is something that's really interesting. I'm not sure whether we actually discussed it last week, but there was a thing about some medical, I think it was in a medical journal, I think you highlighted it to me, about the overprescription, about the medical profession having to tell the patients the side effects of antidepressants. Is that right? Remember you sent that to me? Do you want to cover a little bit about that?
I did, and it's very sad because this is an example of really irresponsible reporting. It's a complete disgrace, and I'll tell you why.
The article was a disgrace.
The article is a complete disgrace because all it's doing is it's trying to publish bad news about something, sensationalize it for the sake of a story, without thinking of the consequences it will have on patients. Now, I've given thousands of prescriptions of antidepressant. And even now, I will recommend people go for antidepressant, and they get given antidepressant. And I've rarely seen anyone have severe withdrawal syndrome from antidepressants. Maybe 10 to 20% will have a mild withdrawal where if they cut it off suddenly, they'll get like little electric shocks going through the sensation of electric shocks going through their body, mainly their hands and fingers. Sometimes it's flu-like symptoms, but the vast majority of people of those will get over it very quickly.
But you just keep on lowering the dose.
That's right.
To get it over it.
So, as I said, if you suddenly stop an antidepressant, 10 or 20% will have these mild symptoms. Sometimes they'll be a bit uncomfortable, but they will go quite quickly within a couple of weeks. In my clinical experience, I've only seen one patient come to me from someone else who needed help because she was really unwell coming off antidepressants. And for her, we put her on a long-acting antidepressant so it came out of her system very slowly. And then I had another person come to me, and his main symptom was that he'd lost a lot of sensation in his penis. So that sex was much less pleasurable for him. And indeed, it seems that is a very rare but medically accepted phenomenon. Usually a side effect of antidepressants can be mild difficulty with erections, delayed ejaculation, but that usually settles.
Actually, that's an interesting question you bring up because the thing is, sometimes, particularly how we live our lives and other things that we do in our life, and it's a combination of other factors that we can actually say, is it like this is a likely cause, when it could actually be the red herring, or it could just be one small trigger of it, because, I mean, for all we know, the guy could have been addicted to, let's say, porn, hypothetically.
Oh, well, the thing is, these also, it's not, you don't get antidepressant withdrawal as such. You don't get craving. It's not an addiction. They're not addictive things. You get a withdrawal syndrome where you get a few symptoms, but you certainly don't crave it. You don't go, give me my antidepressant at all.
But you know, it's actually, and that brings up another interesting point. Now you've gone on to antidepressants and putting people on antidepressants, and I know we've discussed this, and we probably disagree a little bit on this matter because, and admittedly, granted, you've talked about clinical depression, and you've talked about people who are just going through a state of depression. Now, for someone who's got no medical training, I can't differentiate between the two. And, so I'll be open to that I may be wrong. However, there are so many people who are being put on antidepressants when they shouldn't be. Okay, whether they misdiagnosis just because they're in a bad state, for example,